would love to encourage everyone who's able to turn on their camera. I know it's not always possible. Makes it nicer for me to present to not into the abyss. So if you're comfortable turning on your camera, great. If not, then I want to at least encourage you to go wild on the emoji responses for a little bit of crowd participation. There won't be any tricky questions, don't worry. I hope that you actually have tricky questions for me, because I quite like a difficult challenge being posed to me. So don't hold back. I've told Amy that I'm happy to answer questions throughout. So she's going to make a call of whether a question would be best addressed right now or left to Q&A later on. So go for it. Let's dive straight in. And can I just quickly confirm that you can see my screen? I can get a little thumbs up. Yeah, okay, perfect. Good, so welcome everybody. It's lovely to be here. It's great to come back. I don't remember quite exactly when the last time was I spoke at the Austin Talk, but I have spoken before. And to start us off, I would love to hear from the audience, what is a word or a phrase or a sentence that comes to mind when you hear the term managing up? What's your first reaction? Pop it in the chat, and then I would just love that context before my presentation. And as you type, let me quickly introduce myself. So as mentioned, I'm Eva Murray, and I worked in data and tech across a little over 13 years before going out on my own. And in that time, I helped organizations address their data challenges. And I started out in consulting. I then moved into financial services, back into consulting, and then I worked for 2 software companies. So I did get a lot of different angles on the same data problems and data solutions, and what companies are trying to do with data. And I think that's given me a really rich experience of what people in different jobs do with data, and also what kind of opportunities exist. And that's what led me here. And what I love doing in my time in the Tableau community, I've mentioned it as one of the bullet points, is helping people figure out what to do in terms of learning data skills, but also what to do next. Because I came to the point where I realized I'm never going to be the best data analyst, data visualization person. I really enjoyed it, but I knew to really build those technical skills that other people have, I'm like, oh, that will be a lot more effort, and it's not where my talents lie. So I decided helping other people be great at their job, that's my jam, and here I am. So I haven't had any reactions that I can see in the chat. If nothing comes to mind, maybe managing up is a topic that you hadn't really thought much about yet, or maybe that feels a bit icky. Like, I will dive into that a bit later. Jesse says, managing up, building better working relationships with the manager. Great. Climbing the ladder. I like that. Handling politics in the workplace. Yes. Yes. It can be all of those. It can be more. But let's see what we can cover today. So the session is recorded. We've covered all of this already. Ask questions, but also, and I saw Ojo already put his link in, use this call to connect with other people. Share your details, share your LinkedIn or your Tableau public profile so you can connect, especially with this virtual setting. The networking takes a little bit more effort because you're not all in a room exchanging business cards or shaking hands. So make sure you get that out of this call as well. And let me start with a story about a trip to Stockholm. So I was working in a job, and there was this event in Stockholm that I wanted to attend. It was, totally fair for the work context, but as is typically the case, I still had to get approval for the travel because it would cost money to fly. This was when I was based in Germany. It would cost money to fly and to stay there overnight. So I had to kind of figure out, how do I convince my boss that this is a good idea? And the way I approached it was to build a really solid agenda. I said, this is the time I'm going to spend at this event, like learning something for myself, networking, etc. But I'm also going to spend, organize a meeting with a partner we had locally, organize something with colleagues, and organize something with a customer. So that overall, it wasn't just about this event that didn't have an immediate return for the company and was interesting for me, relevant for the company, but I added something more to the agenda. And what I also did was put all of that onto a one-pager, and I said, this is what I want to do. Here's the itinerary. This is the cost. This is when I'm going to travel. Like, this is how much time I'm going to spend away. And here's how I'm going to look after any kind of, stuff that comes up during my time away. So, I will check in, I will make sure I join the team call, etc. And I presented it to him and he's like, okay, go ahead. And that's what I want you to think about when it comes to managing up. It's only one element, but it's this idea of what do you have to do to get a yes quite easily. And when I say quite easily, you put all the work in preparing to get the yes, but you want to make it as easy as possible for your manager to say, yeah, go ahead. Great idea. Should have thought of that myself. So the moral of the story is you've got to learn to manage your manager if you want them to create these opportunities for you and to say yes to the things that are important to you. The reason why I think it's really important to talk about managing up is because I have found in every single job, without exaggerating, in every single job, managing up has been what makes the difference. It wasn't just a random one-off thing where I'm like, oh, it worked really well for this trip to Stockholm. I wonder what else I could do. Every single job I experienced this. So it's not just random. Like managers are people like everyone else. They love being kind of taken care of. But especially because they have such a mental load of having to make decisions, taking limited information into account to say, okay, what's the risk here? Like, can I approve this? If you can give them all the information in a digestible format that makes it easy for them to say, yeah, go ahead. Like, I don't have to worry about this anymore. Then that's huge. And that is a really good way to build the relationship. There are more things managing up, but I want this just to be a really like a simple, easy to understand example. It's also really helpful generally for your career growth. So seeing your career progress over time by working really as a team with your manager and with other leaders. It doesn't just have to be your line manager. It could be other leaders as well. I'm using your manager as the kind of default because that's typically the person we get approval from for these kind of things. It's helpful for promotions because earning and achieving those promotions without just hoping and praying is really important. I know it can be quite tempting to sit there and think, I've done all the great work. I did that myself. I thought, surely it's obvious that I deserve a promotion. Like I've put all the work in. But there is a little bit of intentionality that can happen in terms of communicating where you want to be, what you want to do. And that is also part of managing up. Getting to do some really cool things, working on interesting projects, learning about new opportunities as they come up. And then also being able to say yes and embrace the challenge because you're like, okay, if my manager presents this to me, they think I'm capable, rather than getting something really exciting onto your desk and thinking, oh, shoot, am I good enough to do this? Also trying something new. So being really deliberate and intentional about building relationships is maybe something people haven't thought of before. It's what I hear a lot in client calls where people say, my career has been good so far, but it kind of just happened by accident. Like I kind of just progressed. I wasn't really intentional about it. I want to be intentional now. And this relationship with your manager is also something where you can be intentional and you can be deliberate. And finally, I know how much the Tableau community loves learning new things. I know there's a few people on this call in particular who really actively build their technical skills and also their soft skills, but I know exactly like us data nerds, we love building those technical skills. So getting more of that, getting more training, more development, and making that happen. Now let's talk a bit about what it's not, because I think what I kind of got from some of the comments is manipulation, flattery, the kind of icky bits around, oh, the landmines, like that stuff is not what managing up is, but I think it's what comes up sometimes for people. It's not, and I don't think I put this on the slides. I wasn't sure if it would be censored. It's not ass kissing or ass kissing. And what it requires, it's actually quite a delicate thing because it requires you to be thoughtful, to plan, to know the other person, to read between the lines, to understand what makes them tick. So it's not just very blunt, like, pick me kind of behavior. It means you have to be resourceful. You have to use your imagination and understand, what matters to my manager, what matters to the company, so that you can have meaningful interactions around all of this. So I've got another question. Who on this call feels like they've already tried to actively manage their manager in some way? And if you're happy to share, what's an example of something you did? I'm just going to take a drink of water while you type. Okay. Comments are always good, but we're also going to just continue along. If you're still typing, I know that sometimes. Oh, question. Oh, Joe, I'm going to get back to that question. Let me get a couple of definitions out of the way, just so we're all on the same page. So, I will have in this presentation, I will have very practical things for you to do. So don't worry about, oh, is this going to be just theory? No, there will be practical tips, but I want to just make sure that we're all clear on what we mean by managing up, especially like how I'm defining it, so that you can take my advice and put it into context. So it's less about like handshakes and more about really working together like a well-oiled machine. That's why I've put those gears there, because it's not the typical stock photo of two people shaking hands. That's not managing up. It's working together in a way, the only way I can describe it in words that feel like they resonate with me and the situations I've experienced, is there is a certain professional chemistry that just makes you work with your manager. And it can be other people as well, where it's like, yeah, this is great. Like we bounce off each other. We know exactly how to work together in a difficult meeting, for example. I had this in quite a few, actually, let me do a quick detour. I had quite a few meetings in the US. So this was always a big deal in my time, especially when I worked at Exasol, you know, German company, not huge. Getting meetings on the West Coast with big companies was a big deal. But going in there with my manager, and we just had to glance at each other to know exactly, okay, I'm at the end of my spiel, like you've got to take over, and vice versa. That was what worked really well. Like we knew each other really well in who can bring what to the meeting. And also sometimes, you know, in these conversations, you just need a break and you need to know the other person is ready to like jump in at a moment's notice. So that's what I mean by the chemistry, you know, when things just work really nicely. What it also involves, and I've alluded to some of this, is understanding not just the needs that your manager has, but also the pressures they're facing. Because that's where a lot of the value you can add comes in and where they can feel a real big sense of relief.
But we have two questions, Eva.
Yes.
Julie would like to know, how do you handle issues when data is spread between multiple divisions? So I guess she has multiple bosses.
You've got to manage multiple people. And I would say pick one to start with. I will say in my experience, there's going to be the key person and there will be others. And I've definitely managed up with colleagues who were not even more senior, but maybe more experienced. They saw themselves as more senior. I had a strategy for each person. And I know that takes us back to this like, oh, that sounds manipulative. But when I say that, it's like, what I mean is making the effort to understand, okay, what's important for that person? Or how will this person react in a meeting? Like, how do I manage the interactions really effectively? To give you an example, what mattered to my manager would have been things like, okay, we've got to have meetings, we've got to create opportunities for sales, we've got to build a pipeline. Like that is what matters to people who are sales focused. What mattered maybe to a colleague is, oh, can Eva do this technical stuff so that if I bring her into a meeting, like could she do a technical demo? But at the time, the person maybe didn't trust my skills. So I had to kind of prove and say, you know, I know what I'm talking about here. So that was how I worked on that relationship, is giving them a lot of proof, not in a submissive way, but in a, yeah, here's another example of good stuff I've done. And then another person, again, would maybe, I'm not saying all of these relationships are difficult, but everyone has a different agenda. And that doesn't have to be a negative thing. It's just, you know, all of you have professional goals, whether they are agreed with your manager or just like kind of more your personal goals for your career. But you've got targets to hit. So when you think about that, everyone comes with a different set of expectations and needs. And I think you will need an approach for every person, but I would start with the person where the impact is like biggest, whether that's your direct manager or maybe the person above or somebody on the side. But just, you know, where do you have the most touch points? I would not start with the most difficult, because you want to get some runs on the board where, you're like, okay, this is working, I'm going to keep at it, but you've got to start with one. Don't start with all of them at the same time.
And we have one more question right now from Crystal. She says, what do you do if you present all the information to get manager's decision and the manager says no?
Good question. Really good question. So that may still be the case. I would then ask why. So if I've gone and let me give you another example. Maybe let me take you through that West Coast trip that we organized. My manager came to me and he said, you know what, Ida, I think we should go to the West Coast. I think we should do a road trip. And I know that means we're not just going to drive like Bonnie and Clyde along the West Coast. We're actually having to do like a sales trip. And I wasn't in sales, but so I'm like, okay, what does this mean? Like, I knew him well enough to translate this into, Eva, can you put together some ideas? But that doesn't mean, oh, here's a bullet point list. I put together an entire like PowerPoint slide deck with the recommended itinerary of, we start in San Francisco, then we do stuff there in Silicon Valley and we go up to Seattle. This is how many days. This is when we're going to fly. We're going to use a rental car. These are the people we're going to meet. These are the companies we're going to meet. We're also going to present at a TUG and we're going to meet some people from Tableau. And I put it all together somehow, like, of course, this is not a 10-minute job, right? This took me hours across multiple days to figure something out, get some indicative pricing for, business class flights for him, business class flights for him, economy class flights for me, hotel, like, and, we're going to have a dinner with clients, blah, blah, blah. So I put all of this together. Now, if, like, he did say yes, and we then tweaked things a bit, but if he had said no, I would ask, okay, what's missing here? Because if you have exhausted your ability to, put, like, you're not a mind reader, what I would safely assume is if you've put all of that in place and said, okay, I've thought of everything, I've put myself in his position or in her position, in my own, I've put myself into the assistant's position, like thinking of all the stuff, and it's still a no, there must be something else at play. And there could be just okay, there's going to be some upcoming budget cuts your manager's aware of, but you're not. So it could be simply that you don't have access to certain information that is vital for that decision. I would go back with, hey, I've put all this together thinking, this would be really helpful, but like, what's missing here? What have I overlooked? I would probably, personally, my style, I would play the humble card and be like, what have I missed? What have I missed here? Because in my experience, that was more likely to trigger the response of, no, you did nothing wrong. But what you didn't know is, I'm actually going to be away. I'm going to get surgery during that time. This is not going to work, or something like that, right? And I would also say a no is never final. It might be a not yet. So that's how I would approach it. And I hope that helps you. And while we're on the topic of questions, actually, why don't I quickly pick up Ojo's question? He posted that in the chat. How do we not overshine our managers and create insecurities? Do not dim your light just because of someone else's insecurities, would be my straight answer. I know exactly what you mean. There can be political situation where it's going to be really frowned upon or downright like dangerous for your career if you perform better than your manager and you make them look bad. But that's a reflection on them, not a reflection on you. I think typically your manager will be in a position where they have responsibility for people and for strategies, budgets, and those kind of things, not as much technical responsibility for delivery, development, projects, design, those kind of things as you. So hopefully there are areas where they can shine, even if they're not as technical as you or anything like that. But I would say, like, if you are outshining your manager in an area that they should be good at, well, that is also going to make some things obvious and give people something to think about, as long as it's not maliciously done. Like, I wouldn't go around and say, okay, how can I get to this person? That wouldn't be my approach. And I know that's not yours. That's not what you're asking. But I would not hold back my own performance just because somebody else might feel insecure about it. I think it does also come down to how you message it and how you broadcast it. I think if it is done with the best intentions, saying, hey, I'm like, this is how I approach the project. I've worked really well with the stakeholders, blah, blah, blah. The outcome is great. They love your dashboards. They love your analysis. The stakeholders say, this is amazing. We want to work with Ojo again on the next project. That's not something that could really be then seen as, oh, they want to outshine me. It's like, no, they did a job well. And what I would say, if you know that your manager has those insecurities or might feel threatened, I would err on the side of, and I will probably get to that a bit later as well, a bit of over communication, like keeping them really informed in your progress so that they don't feel blindsided if you present something. They're like, oh my God, I haven't seen that yet. Like, what's going on here? And everyone loves it, and they're kind of out of the loop. So I would make sure they're super informed, and it's also kind of a bit their success, like that they can be perceived as the person who enabled your great performance, which doesn't take anything away from you, but it gives them a chance to kind of save face. Last point before I move on, there's always going to be a cultural component in this as well. I'm not an expert on culture. I've lived in different cultures, and I'm just simply aware that that can play into it, how things are understood, how they're perceived, how they are assumed, and how they're communicated. So that is just something to also always ask yourself is there something at play here that I have kind of not considered in terms of culture? Because fascinating topic in and of itself. Book recommendation is The Culture Map by Erin Meyer. Okay, good. I'm going to move on. What I was talking about here in terms of defining the project, the concept is understand their needs, understand the pressures they face and what they're measured on. You know, what are the KPIs for your manager that they're going to aim for? What is going to make them look good at the end of the year? And the role you play in all of that, because ideally in an organization, and this is how I experienced in my most recent job at Snowflake, is the goals of the company filter down into the different departments, into the different teams, to the different people individually. So when you help your manager achieve their goals, it should also automatically help you achieve your goals. So I'm not saying sacrifice all of your individual stuff for them, absolutely not, but you're playing a role in their success, and being clear on that can really help you in this whole process. One thing that served me really well, especially at the beginning of my career, was when I didn't necessarily know what else there was I could be involved in, is simply asking, is there anything else I can help you with? And my first manager very clearly said, Eva, I really appreciate you asking me this before you leave the office. And I would say 90% of the time he said, no, go home. But the fact that I asked really helped him to see, I was dedicated. And of course, as a fresh graduate, you're like, oh my God, I'm so eager. And, I was keen to learn, but it just seemed like a really clever thing to say, because yes, sometimes I stayed a bit later, maybe 8 p.m., but this was very rare. And they just appreciated the offer and not feeling like, oh my God, I'm going to be alone in the office again. Like, yes, Eva, could you help me? It's going to take half an hour and it's going to save me a ton of time. There is another book recommendation I want to make. And I love this book. I listened to it on Audible, Unreasonable Hospitality. And you'll see in the subtitle, The Remarkable Power of Giving People More Than They Expect. So it takes the learnings from building one of the best restaurants in the world and helps you apply that to your own situation. So what are some inspirations and ideas that we can learn from the service industry, hospitality, where, like these people have gone absolutely above and beyond? You can't do that every single day, but it just helps you think, oh, what else could I do? And sometimes it's a very small effort on your part, but a really big payoff. Okay, managing up versus being passive or overly aggressive. So managing up really also is just taking charge of your career. If you're passive, you might wake up one day and say, I've been a passenger in my career. You can, of course, still be successful and experience progression, but it's a feeling of, it's just kind of happened to me rather than choosing it intentionally, like I said earlier. And I think if somebody is overly aggressive and really ass-kissing, like I said earlier, that shows. It becomes obvious very quickly, because these people are typically not very liked by their colleagues. Like, even if you can't put your finger on it, there's just something that makes you go, ugh, it's just a bit yuck. And it actually exhausts your manager, because you might be well-intentioned, but for them, it's like, oh my God, this constant barrage of stuff. What we want to achieve is the opposite. We want your manager to be really glad to have you on the team. We want them to think, this is my go-to person. Like, I know I can rely on them for specific projects, for, processes, specific topics. And you are like the right-hand person that they think of first. Okay, so here's some ideas of what people might say about you when you do this really well. And you may not even, like, you're probably already doing a bunch of these things, whether you're conscious of it or not. But you're reliable, you're trustworthy. I will let you read through those. I'm not going to read you the slides because I know you're going to skim it anyway. But some benefits you'll experience as a result is better career opportunities, stronger relationships, and also that increased visibility internally. What I experienced myself, interesting projects because people, they know your skills. What my first manager at Deloitte, what he always said is, you want to make sure that the room where you're not at the table, when the managers talk about promotions or when they talk about who gets assigned to what project, you want somebody to say your name. You want somebody to say, I want Eva on my project. I want Ojo on my project. And I also want Jesse on my project, because they know what you're all about and you have built those relationships. And over time, you're going to build a really extensive network that way, inside and outside of your organization. And it helps you build your personal brand, because as you put in this extra effort, and I want to quickly clarify, I'm not saying burn the candle at both ends and constantly do overtime, work the weekends. I'm just saying finding ways to just do the bit extra that makes you stand out, that helps you build your brand. And that could be things as simple as when you create a PowerPoint slide deck, it's super polished. And there's something about it that makes people see it and be like, oh yeah, I know that Jesse created this. Like it just shows. And I think you'd also enjoy your work more because you're going to see better results as an outcome. Okay, so how do you do it? Let's talk about some practical steps. And it really starts by understanding your manager truly. So what's their working style? Some people are really hands-off. They're like, this is what we need to do. You figure out how. That can be a bit scary, right? Because we all like a little bit of guidance. They can also be quite hands-on. Maybe they're very technical. Maybe they were really experienced technical expert and they then stepped into management. They can be detail-oriented, big picture people. They could be micromanagers, which is another story in and of itself. But having a think about what's their working style and how does it manifest itself? And then I said it before, what are their goals and their pressures? So I mentioned that, the company's goals should filter down individually. The way we had this at Snowflake is there's targets for the entire company. I was sitting in marketing, global marketing. So the CMO had her targets. She pushed those down to her, I think VPs was the next level. And then that filtered down. So I had to make sure the targets I set myself every quarter would align to those overall goals. And that's what I was measured on. And it was a really good habit to get into, because it meant that the things that you did that moved the needle were really beneficial for everyone, and people would appreciate it because of that. And people would celebrate the wins because of that, because it's not just somebody's hobby project, but yes, this all helps us to achieve the next big conference or, those kind of things. So yeah, what are people measured on? What's on their mind as well? And the more you build a trusting relationship, the more people will share. Like, I've been in some conversations, I'm like, this is completely above my pay grade. But I was this trusted person where they just said, I really value your input. I know this is not technically part of your job, but I'd love to hear your perspective. Also, who are their allies, and do they have anyone that they have a challenging relationship with? What are their goals? What do they want to be known for? Sometimes it's obvious. Sometimes it's, okay, we are going to do a huge migration from Power BI to Tableau, or we are, going to now move everything to, gosh, what is it called? Tableau Cloud. Like there's going to be big projects that people stick their name to, and they can be career defining. And then how can you make that happen, or how can you help them make those things happen? Okay. This is another favorite story of mine. And this is a story about a meeting with difficult stakeholders. So they all had their own goals and ideas. And my manager and I, we were on this project, just the two of us. And most of the time it was just me at the client side, and he would kind of drop in and out. It was my first gig. And he said to me, this is what's going to happen. He said, Eva, I appreciate your skills. You're great at your job. You're still new, but I appreciate all of those things. Right now, I need a woman in the room because I need you to just be there because it helps diffuse the tension. There was so much like, I don't want to say masculine energy, to borrow a term from Mark Zuckerberg, but there was a lot of, just tension, highly charged because of these conflicting agendas that everyone was pursuing. And I just had to be there. I didn't have to speak. I didn't have to present anything because I was just a few weeks into the gig. But he said, it was being an extra person, but also being a woman in a room full of men. And I think it's easy to, look at that's, I mean, I'm trying to be aggravating here a little bit. It's easy to look at this quote and be offended. But I wasn't, because he did explain it. We had a briefing beforehand. He said, this is what to expect. Take some notes, just observe, just see if what you can pick up. And then straight afterwards, we sat down and we debriefed, and he took me through kind of play by play. Okay, did you notice that this was, this is because of X, this is because of Y, and that's why this person said that. They didn't like what I had to say, but we all agreed in the end. He was able to run the meeting more effectively because I was there. And what it really helped me understand is we can always play a role, even if we don't have an active part in the meeting, but we can always play a role. And having somebody like him say those things out loud that normally I just assume, somebody could just be, can you just take notes? It would be the same outcome. An extra person sitting there, not saying anything and taking notes, but a very different story, right? And it's really stayed with me. This was in 2011, so, it's been a while. But it helped him, achieve his goals. And in the end, because I was on the project and things ran more smoothly afterwards, helped me as well. One thing I do want to mention is that communication can be really hard. I mentioned cultural factors. I think, there's language factors at play. English is not my first language. I think I'm doing all right, but I do still in meetings, whether that's with people here in the UK, with people in America, like I still come across things from like, why is that funny? Because I'm not a native speaker, but also I didn't grow up in those cultures. I grew up in Germany, very different sense of humor. So I've put this in here. Who has heard of insights.com, Insights Discovery? There's a bunch of different of these kind of tests that you can do. It's about communication styles, different strengths, behaviors. And I bring this up because an easy way to start with all of this managing up is just to ask your manager, when next time there's an opportunity, about their preferences. So if you give them regular updates, great. That should not take up the time in your one-to-one. Like one-to-ones should be not status updates, because that could be an email. But maybe they wanted it, face-to-face. But how would they like to communicate? Is it email? Is it meetings? Is it quick chats? And the simple act of asking somebody, what's a good way to communicate with you? Often they're like, oh, no one's asked me this before. Like, that's really nice. Somebody is considerate of how I would like to receive information. But also, you may have spent a ton of time creating elaborate status updates where all they want to know is, are we red or green? Like, that's all they care about because they trust you and they're not really worried unless it's red. So asking that question, and you see here, like this colorful thing. So it's basically, splits people up into these 4 categories of the way you communicate and kind of behaviors and personal styles. I've done this in pretty much most companies I worked in, and only at Snowflake did we actually then as a team sit down and say, what's everyone's style? Like, how do you communicate? And what it helped me understand is, okay, this person isn't being rude when they send like a really short and sharp email. That's just their style. They don't need the chit chat. So when she sent me an email, I was no longer offended. She knew I would probably put a bit more text in there. I would maybe cushion things a little bit if I have a request. So she didn't have to be annoyed that my emails were longer. Somebody else who wants to first talk about how that weekend was and how their dog was and, grandma and stuff. Okay, I know if I talk to this person for half an hour, I need to step the first 5 minutes aside for relationship building before we go in. Because I'm somebody who's like, okay, let's get on with it. Let's do some work. Knowing this, being aware is really helpful. If you have the chance to go through one of these exercises of finding out your own style and maybe your colleagues, discussing it as a team, super valuable, because it just the simple step of building awareness helps to reduce miscommunication, misunderstandings, and some tension and challenges as well. Okay, so some more practical tips, because I'm all about some practical stuff. Oh yes, Homer, I'm ready for more Q&A. Hit me.
We have several questions. Blake asked, how can you find the balance between speed to delivery and providing the opportunity to upskill for junior peers on my team?
Okay, good question. Let me just make sure I fully understand. So this is like everyone has a full schedule of work, tasks they need to build, need to do to deliver the work. And it's like, where's the time to then learn things, take time away from the delivery to learn? Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
The first thing I would do is look at the calendar and see if any meetings can be cancelled or removed, because I find that's typically a quick win. There might be an hour per week that can be freed up by not having a certain meeting. That could be an email, or that just is no longer necessary. For every individual, what I would recommend, especially when it comes to meetings, is I think most of us, well, me no longer, but in my corporate life, most of us have meetings in the calendar. We're like, this is a weekly or a monthly or a fortnightly meeting. It's so boring. I don't really want to be there. It doesn't really add value to my life. I don't feel I can add value. Okay. It's easy for me to say, just get rid of it, just don't show up. But I know that sometimes you can't just not show up, because that might be politically not the right move. So what I suggest is approaching the organizer and saying, hey, I've been coming to these meetings. I want to make sure it's a good use of your time to have me there, but also my time to be there. What role would you like me to play? Put it back on the organizer to say why they invited you. Maybe they want to inform you. It's like, okay, send me the notes, send me the slides, send me a summary, whatever. Like, especially now with AI and AI notes, which hopefully some companies use effectively, there's no excuse to spend a lot of people's time in long meetings when they could get a summary quite easily. But if they say, actually, we would love to have your input. Okay, I need 5 minutes on your agenda next week, and I'm going to talk about X. Like, I would try to be really proactive about using your time wisely, because then you can still assess, okay, is this a good use of my time? But you've given it a go. So meetings is something I find typically an easy place to start freeing up half an hour a week. What I would also say is I would ask the team, because I've been surprised in the past by how many creative ideas people had when we asked them, rather than trying to figure it out for them. And it could be that somebody says, like, I don't mind doing this in the evening or on my own time. Like, I really enjoy it. I just need the budget to do this course. Like, okay, great. Like, that could be one solution, that somebody is quite happy to do that. For other people, if they have a family, they probably don't want to do stuff in their spare time because they want to spend time with their kids and their spouse. What could a solution be for them? Well, maybe they get access to, well, an audio course might be quite hard for data skills, but I'm just trying to think, there could be other ways they like to learn. I would start by asking them if there's anything they've thought of already. I think they will appreciate knowing you care about investing in their skill building and, having them continue training. And it could also be that maybe every so often, whether that's once a fortnight or once a month, okay, we're going to block 2 hours as a team. No distractions, no email, no Slack. We all go into a room, and all we do is we work on the skill building thing. And either everyone does their own individual bit they want to focus on. Maybe you do something together as a group exercise. Maybe you invite like external speakers or something. But this is focus for the team, and it's non-negotiable. And the distractions are removed. No phones on the table. Nothing. Like it's. And people will be surprised by how much they can get out of 2 hours. So that's some thoughts on that.
We had a question from Radhika. How do you handle management that is resistant to new technology and changes, but we see a great potential for in the growth of the organization? Also, he asked how to ensure that our career is not stalled.
Sorry, the career doesn't stall?
How do you ensure that your career is not stalled?
Oh, big questions. Let me tackle the technology one first. I would say, so it's funny. I used to say, oh my God, when you start a new company, why don't you do it properly right from the beginning? Why don't people use Tableau straight away instead of Excel? Yeah, because it costs money. So having done my own, started my own business, I now know these quick solutions exist, and eventually they become outdated technologies, because in the beginning there just isn't necessarily the money for enterprise solutions. What I would say again is, okay, could you put together a business case of why this is important? Including maybe, okay, what are competitors doing? Are they using that technology? Has that helped them? Depending on the personalities, maybe it could be a good idea to invite somebody in to speak about, well, it could be somebody from the vendor, but of course, with salespeople, I know there's always this reluctance, like, I don't want to talk to a salesperson. But maybe it's another customer that could have been. And when I worked at Commonwealth Bank in Australia, I was a Tableau user. This was when Tableau in Australia had 5 employees. Like, it was very small. This was in 2013, 2014. And Tableau were talking to a bank in New Zealand, and they said, Eva, you're a really happy customer. Can we take you out for lunch? Would you talk to this other customer about your experience with Tableau? And I'm like, lunch? Of course, like, count me in. So we went to a really nice lunch in the Hilton in Sydney, and there was this other bank, and I just talked about my experience with Tableau. I mean, sure, I got a lunch out of it, but also I didn't do it for that. I did it because I genuinely loved the product, and they were able to ask me some questions. And I don't actually know whether they signed in the end, because that I was a customer, not really working for Tableau. But that can also work, to have somebody who's already doing it sharing their story. And of course, that happens at conferences, at Tableau user groups, but maybe you could bring somebody in. I think the community is big enough for somebody to be quite willing to say, hey, it's working for us. And this is how we've experienced it. And if you set all of these things up right, so putting together a business case, saying, hey, as part of this evaluation, we've got contacts. Here are 3 people that you're welcome to speak to, who are happy to share their experience with this technology, and then go from there. Ensuring your career doesn't stall. I think I will have to park this, because we're going to run out of time, and that's a very big question, and going slightly off from the managing up. But I do want to answer it. So let's put it towards the end, and let me just run through. Oh, I've got a few more slides. Let me just run through the last few slides, just with some very specific practical things you can do. So first one is to be proactive. So you can provide status updates, make it really efficient, raise issues proactively. Like, managers really like knowing what's going on, but also asking for help, and taking on new responsibilities, etc. So being proactive, but also communicating effectively. You can write a status update in an email. You can, first step is, okay, just dumping the text, right? Then you format it nicely. I would say skip all of that, go straight to a really nicely designed one-pager, because people really like when things look nice, as you all know, given your Tableau involvement. Like, when somebody puts a status update on a nicely, and it doesn't have to be PowerPoint, but just something that makes a nice layout, maybe with some visuals, just something that's easy on the eye, because people are constantly bombarded with information. So what would you enjoy looking at? And then highlight what's really important. And you don't have to include everything. If your manager feels like you have the answers, then give them the information they need, and they can always ask you more questions. Solve problems. I actually hate when somebody says, I don't want to hear your problem, I want to hear your solution. Well, sometimes you don't have the solution, that's why you go to them. But what you can say is, this is the stuff I've tried, and I'm running out of ideas. Now I need your help. So it's giving them the knowledge and the reassurance that you have given it a go, you have tried to solve it, but you've run out of ideas, rather than going there straight away when the problem appears. Also, what's the priorities? So it's not about being a doormat and dropping everything as soon as your manager says, jump over here, but it's being supportive, being strategic, helping your manager achieve their goals, and then putting yourself on the path to achieving your own as well. And finally, building trust and reliability. I have experienced it time and again that people really appreciate when you do this consistently, and they're like, yeah, I know I can go to this person over and over again, like, they will not let me down. You deliver, you communicate the results, you take action as soon as you can. So once you have that first meaningful outcome, show them, even if it's a very rough first draft, but it just makes people happy to know, oh yeah, this is underway. Rather than saying, oh, last month I asked you about XYZ, have you started? Oh my God, yes, it's almost finished. No. Like tell them along the way that you're doing it, over communicate. And also share, what are your plans? Map it out on a one-pager. Big fan of a one-pager. And that way they can ask you really specific questions, and they can also highlight, are you being too cautious? Are you being too optimistic? Oh, this might be something for another day, but if you're happy for me to keep going, I will very quickly skim through these. These are kind of additional topics that are adjacent to managing up. One is about visibility. So how can you make your work more visible? Sharing it in a non-obnoxious way, as I like to say. What have you learned? If you've done something that you feel resonates with the team, hey, I could do a lunch and learn session on this. Like I could do, really short presentation. Or if nobody had asked yet, or you're like, I'm just going to record a video and share it on Slack. Like record a video of yourself taking them through something and be like, hey, here's something I learned at a presentation the other day. Like, take it or leave it. And yeah, you all probably up here have a bunch of frameworks and templates that you could create based on the repeatable processes that you go through. I'm a big believer in sharing those because it's going to get you noticed. And you will, if you're like, oh, what if I start a new job? You create it again. You make sure that you know what that looked like, and you will recreate it. And then develop your own, signature visual style so that people can easily recognize your work. This maybe is on the stalling career conversation or question. When you think about your own development and talking to your manager, and I actually had a conversation earlier today where maybe this is a very private sector thing where people actually set these goals and have development plans. Set the goals, set the targets, have an action plan of how you will achieve them, but also keep your manager updated. And if you're aiming for a promotion, for example, once a month at least in your one-to-ones, be like, hey, so this is, like first you say, hey, I want to get a promotion next year. Like, what do I need to do? What's the gap? And then you keep them updated. Hey, I've done some talks, like I'm addressing my public speaking skills, or maybe you've got some development on like technical skills that you've got to do. So you're like, hey, I've done the course, I've completed it, I've done some projects I'd love to share with the team. Like, just keep them updated on how you're doing. They might feel like, okay, thank you. I didn't ask for this, but thank you. But they will get used to it, and they will actually realize it's valuable that they don't have to ask you for information, because if they have to ask you, they first have to remember to ask you, which means they have to remember that they talked to you about it. But if you just prompt them, that's something they don't have to worry about. And asking for feedback, be as specific as you can when you ask for feedback. So if I ask for feedback about this presentation, I would not go to, for example, Cecilia and say, Cecilia, can you give me feedback on the presentation? Because she will think, oh my God, where do I start? I would say, Cecilia, did you think that the examples were really relevant? Like, what did you think of the examples? Or what did you think of my slide design? Like something very specific. And the way I've also done this, and this will hopefully be useful if you think about the Tableau conference, if any of you are presenting, is when you practice beforehand, please practice and rehearse, get people in the room, rent a crowd, colleagues, friends, it doesn't really matter, and say, okay, before I start the presentation, I would love to get feedback afterwards from you. So can person A please pay attention to how often I say and ah? Can you pay attention to whether I'm pausing enough? Like, am I speaking too fast? Give them a job to do, something to focus on, because it's so much easier to give feedback that's constructive if you can be really specific. Okay, final point. Small habits can make a really big difference. For me, it's been removing distractions like my phone, an absolute game changer, not even to see it. Put it in my bag, leave it in the house, doesn't really matter. Also planning for focus time, blocking time in your calendar where you're like, I will focus on this one task rather than, and I will switch off Slack, I will switch off my email. The world will not end if you don't look at Slack for 2 hours. So it's those kind of things. Like I said, removing the meetings that you don't need to be in, and addressing that. Okay, that's the end. That's the end. We can do more questions. I've got more time if you guys have more questions.
There's 3 more questions, Eva. I'm going to paraphrase this. A just Sawi had a question of what do you do if the manager doesn't pass on credit? What do you do? Like they're taking all your success.
Oh, it's really bad style, isn't it? That's where we come back to making your work visible, because then people will know that you've done it. And what I mean by that is, and it doesn't have to be like you don't send an email to everyone in the company, but rather, let's say, I'm trying to think of a specific situation. Okay, so let's say in my time at Snowflake, I was in product marketing and I had an idea for a presentation. Maybe that's not a great example. Maybe I had an idea for something we could do at an event, right? Where people were involved, like multiple people from the team were organizing this event. And I thought, oh, what if we did X? As soon as I have that idea crystallized, so let's say, okay, why don't we do a popcorn stand? Okay, I'm gonna do a one-pager. I'll put a picture of a popcorn stand. This is the budget. This is what I think it'll do. We're gonna have somebody from sales standing there, starting to chat to customers. Like just spell it out, and then I would share it with everyone who's involved in this event, like everyone on the team, so that people know it's from me, but also they can add because they have ideas and they can make it even better. And what I would love managers to do is to not claim credit for the idea, but to stand behind you, and to, if they have to claim credit for something, is to claim credit for being the person who supported your idea, who cheered you on, who helped you make it happen. So what do you have to do for them to do that? What do you have to do about your idea? How do you have to communicate it? How do you have to evolve it to ensure that your manager feels, oh, I want a part of that. I want people to know that she's on my team. I want people to know that I helped her, build these technical skills or whatever they did. So I don't necessarily have a quick fix that will work every time, but that's how I would think about it, and I hope that helps.
And this had a question about what is some advice you can provide on constantly feeling that she and her coworkers are the manager's memory bank?
I don't know if I fully understand the question. Let me phrase it and just make sure it's correct. So the manager kind of offloads their thinking to the senior team members?
It's more so in regards to kind of like constantly being asked about a project and then them not remembering. So in essence, you're kind of their memory bank of like what your team and coworkers are doing, and the manager doesn't manage.
Okay, understood. So I did mention about being very proactive about status updates. Now you can't force your colleagues to do that, and they might not. What I would say is, if you have a really neat template, like let's say you give a status update, I don't know if it's in PowerPoint or in Excel, but you've got some thing where all of the tasks you're working on, you give a status update. Hopefully the team is like, oh, that's a nice way to do it. And you can simply share the template, they can use it, and you can say, hey, manager, here's everyone's status update, so that there is no excuse for them to then constantly go to you and say, no, I need it from you. It's like, everything you need is in this. But what I would also say is, if there is a resistance to that, is to try and have an open conversation about, okay, how do we need to communicate to make this happen? I am more than happy to tell you how the team is doing, but it does take a lot of time away from my other projects. So if you want me to spend an hour updating you every week, what do you want me to drop from my list of priorities to make that happen? Like, I'm always about a bit of negotiation. If they want you to do X, you have to drop Y. And they can decide what Y is, but they need to make the call. And I think it often makes them realize, oh shit, yeah, I could do that myself, or this is not really important. So forcing the conversation about, if the current way we're doing status updates isn't working, can we simplify this process so that everyone's information is in one place? You can go there first, and if you want to clarify, you know who to speak to about which item, so you don't need to come to me all the time. I know that's a bit hard to say, but again, this is something that's how I would think about it. And your colleagues and your manager the best. Are they going to be likely to use, the Excel template? Or I've seen, companies use Slack really efficiently with all the features to, you know, do like reminders, status updates, polls, all sorts of things. I don't know if that's something you have, whether it's a tool, a project management tool, or that kind of thing where that can be done. But also, if it is something that you can't address with your manager, I would probably see, you know, is there the manager above or another peer to talk this through with and just be like, okay, what has worked in other teams, because it's just not sustainable. And I think that mental load and that mental labor is so draining. And there's a book recommendation in there, and it's called The No Club. And it's aimed at women because often women are tasked with some of this, like, you know, can you take notes? Can you set up the coffee machine or whatever? But the idea is, you know, let's put a stop to all this dead end work that people do over the course of their career that doesn't actually advance their career.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in here.
Yes.
You know, this question that you come back with is, well, what would you like me to drop from my list of priorities? If you have this problem with your manager not remembering all the things you do, the place to start is making a list of all the things you're doing now, because they probably have forgotten half the assignments they've given you. And if you just say, well, what do you want me to stop doing? They probably can't remember the thing you should stop doing because it's the least important. So if you write it all down, say, and put it in front of them and say, okay, here is all the assignments that I have that are both continuous, ongoing, and that are special projects. Let's talk about these and say, which is the lowest priority? Because I cannot add this project or this responsibility with this current workload that I have. And I think it's really important to just document continuously. A good example is if you have at a meeting where you're given a new assignment, or you have, let's say, talked about your career path, and your manager has said, okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take this class. I want you to read this book. I want you to, you know, meet with this person and learn this, blah, blah, whatever it is. When you get back to your desk, write all that down, those notes that you took in your notebook, write that up in an email and send it back to your boss and say, okay, this is what I understood that you asked me to do and what we agreed on that I would do in the meeting. Did I miss anything? Just like you said before, coming to it humbly and saying, did I miss anything? And they have two choices. Yeah, you've got this, or you misunderstood, or they can say, yeah, that's it. With that reply, you now have it documented. Okay. And that can help you a lot in a situation where, you know, it's time for promotions, or it's time for raises, or it's time for downsizing. Okay. How do you produce the evidence of all the things you do that people just maybe don't have the visibility, don't realize that you're doing, or they just plain forgot? So I've told both of my kids who are professionals, you know, given them this advice, and it's worked very well for them in both cases.
Yeah, I will say that's, you know, spot on to, yeah, document it, agree it. And Cecilia put in there saying, where did it go? Managers that don't know or can't remember what you and the team are doing are incredibly dangerous. They're unprepared to defend the need for your jobs potentially. And I totally agree. What I will say is I don't want to just kind of speak negatively about managers, because what I also want us to remember, and I'm not you know, pointing fingers at anyone. It's very easy for us to think, oh, but I've given them that status update, right? Like, why don't they remember? But so have 5 other people. And then they have the people above them and beside them who also like come at them with demands. And my kind of equivalent example is that I don't know if you guys remember the time when I co-hosted Makeover Monday and we ran Viz Review, which were these weekly webinars where we would give feedback on people's Vizes. And some people, we couldn't go through all of them. We typically did about, you know, say somewhere between 8 and 12 Vizes for the hour. And then sometimes people reach out to me and they're like, oh, could you just do mine, like here in a message? And for them, they were just one person asking. But I had a community of 22,000 Twitter followers. Now, if just a fraction of them asked me to do this every week, I wouldn't have been able to do my day job. So I think sometimes we need to remember that their response is a reflection of all the other demands that come at them as well, even if we did the best we could to make it as easy as possible for them. So if the answer isn't what you expect or wanted, might be hard, but not take it personally and just see, okay, can I ask again? Or can I find a more efficient way? Can I remove some friction? And if that doesn't, like, there's always a chance to address it. And I will say, I'll put up my hand, difficult conversations are just something I dread, and I know they're hard. At some point you might have to have it, but you can try to pull different levers to see what can actually move the needle to get the behavior change that you're hoping for.
Okay, any other questions, Amy? We've gone over time a little bit, and I want to
we have
maybe
one more question.
Yeah, so one more question, and then what we're going to do is stop the recording and go into our networking time. And that means those of you that need to leave, that's the right time to do it. And those of you who want to stay, I think Eva's offered to stay a little longer with the networking, and you can, be a little more transparent and ask your questions maybe in a more personal situation, and we'll try to see what we can do to help. That sound like a plan, Amy?
Good. So Amy, the question you sent me from Dina, if your team is divided and assigned to different areas, for instance, one person works with departments A, B, and C, but another works with D, E, F. Okay, so 2 people across like 6 departments. How can one Tableau developer try to be more involved in the other person's task without overstepping, but also trying to show the manager you are interested and can be helpful in other areas as well? This is where I think some of that internal to the team, some of that knowledge sharing of, hey, can we just do at the end of the month or at the end of the week, like a 5-minute quick presentation of what we've been working on with these departments? Because that way you can be the first to give something, right? You give them a very interesting quick overview of, this is a cool thing I built for this department. This is a really difficult problem we solved here. This is how we connected the data pipelines. In the 3rd department, what did you work on? And if both of you or if both of these Tableau developers just take, like, I think 5 minutes each should be possible. You should be able to find time on a Friday afternoon or Monday morning, whatever you prefer, to do that quick update. And I think that could be a really nice way to gently ease into, okay, we're going to share and we both know what's going on, because chances are if you have that question, or one person, I'm just making an assumption, but if one person has the question, oh, I would love to get involved in some of this work, maybe the other person also wants that in the other way around. So putting something out there, offering a gift or offering information, offering to share is a good way to start and see what comes back. If the other person is really protective, I'd see if you can find out more about why is that? Why? Like, you're not trying to steal something. You're not trying to steal the glory or the credit or anything. It's just like, okay, I want to learn more. Typically, my experience, people love talking about their work. They love when they've built cool things. And maybe it's then also down to asking in a different way. It's like, okay, maybe you've heard some feedback from one of the departments they're working with. It's like, I heard you built some really cool things there. Like, can you tell me a bit more? And how did you approach that? And having some questions for that person to answer when they present, like, okay, this is the dashboard I built. It's like, oh, how did you do that? Like, I've not seen this before. And figuring out how you can appeal to them sharing more knowledge with you. That's how I would approach it. I think, again, it's a little bit maybe a humble. I'm not somebody who's just going to be like, oh, tell me, like, give it to me. I think if we give first, it sets up the conversation in the right way, and there's just more likelihood of reciprocation. So yeah. Okay, I think that brings us
all right.
So thank you everyone for joining, and yeah, we can stop the recording.
And thank you, Eva, for that wonderful presentation. Let's all give Eva a round of applause for
Thank you.
sharing so much helpful information. Let me stop the recording now.